Okay, hi, ladies and gents. We're going to look at now R.S. Thomas's A Peasant, because we've obviously looked in detail at In Cardigan Market by Brian Morris in our poetry comparison. So we're going to get straight into it, and just a summary really quickly of the poem instead of just reading through it like we did with the first poem. Okay, so A Peasant, it begins with the name of a peasant, and his name is Iago Paterk, or Piterek. Not really sure about the pronunciation, if I'm honest. He's just an ordinary man on these sort of bald, desolate Welsh hills. He pens a few sheep to protect them from the storm and rain. That's his sort of purpose, isn't it, really? To look after his sort of flock. He works on the farm and cuts short the mangels, and that's just a variety of beet, a type of vegetable. He chips the green. There's a sort of half-witted smile and satisfaction in him, almost for the life he lives. He works with the earth that gives sort of flashes of light in the wind. It's got this sense then, as the poem moves on, that his days are now spent, that he's sort of growing close to death. He's grown old by doing such simple things, by living this very simple life. And sort of the joy, the mirth in him is just described as being rarer than the sun. That breaks the cheeks of the bare sky at least once in a week. So we don't really see this joy as much in his life in the same way as we don't see really the sun in the sort of area he lives. I mean, obviously thinking about Wales, we don't really get much sun, do we? It can be quite bleak sometimes, quite overcast, quite gloomy. A bit different at the moment with the lovely sun, which is really rare. This shows the old man perhaps is disappointed in his very rare moments, as we said, of mirth and laughter. The peasant now in old age, at night, he fixes himself in his chair and sort of remains motionless, except when he moves towards the fireplace. He's old and forgetful, his mind is vacant, and something sort of frightening sort of goes through his mind. It's almost like he's haunted by the past and the future. We've got this description. His sort of clothes he's wearing are dirty, almost through just constant use. Almost like, well, what's the point of changing them? What's the point of sort of staying fresh, I suppose, if it's just you on your own all the time? They're almost sour, with years of sweat and animal contact. And this sort of such a sweaty sort of look, this sweaty sort of clothes, they sort of shock the so-called like refined people of the civilized world. The people from towns and cities would see this guy and think, well, what's this person all about? He's just nothing like us at all. We dress well, we change our pants every day. Iago perhaps doesn't. But the thing is, even such people are affected, these sort of civilized people, so to speak, are affected by the sort of really sort of stark naturalness of the peasant. And sort of what I mean by that is that what really stands out about him is that this guy is almost belongs to the environment and is part of the environment. In his simplicity, he really stands out and just seems to belong, and there's something quite impressive and almost admiring from the people about him in that respect. The old man, however, he sort of represents the prototype of the whole peasants' world. Like, he represents all peasants and the way this sort of traditional way of life is being maintained and living on through the memory of him, or through him just as a person and how people see him. He faces, as we look at the end of the poem, he faces the siege of rain and winds, attrition, like that wearing down, and preserves his stock, his tradition and natural rhythm of living. He doesn't sort of allow modernity or just like the modern world to creep in and change his way of life. He stands like, it's described like an impregnable fortress, as in he is like the protector, this metaphorically the preserver of his peasantry, as in the peasant way of life. And in that way, you could describe he's a symbol of triumph, of victory, that like this fortress that is stands against this barrage of wind, of storms, that it won't be damaged, it won't be blown down. He stands up to it. I think that's quite impressive. However, you could read the last part of the poem just as a quick sort of interpretation of it, as the death eventually comes and takes him away. But the thing is, he sort of endures his spirit and the imprint of his life, and representing the life of the peasant, of standing up and against nature and almost working with nature. It sort of remains forever, this way of life. It remains in our memories. This description, obviously, through R.S. Thomas, the poet. He remembers, and it's sort of the idea of the power of this peasant to represent this very simple way of life, but very sort of stubborn and very sort of hard person, against the elements way of life. He has our admiration. So the last two lines are the closing, and the speaker reminds us that the peasant is the winner of wars. And this idea is just trying to sort of articulate, trying to explain to you guys, is that his devotion and sacrifice just, they continue long past his death. We remember what he's done. And his image stands almost like this tree, like he is that tree underneath the curious stars, like he exists, just like the stars are for eternity. He exists and underneath these stars for all of time. And so long as the tree stands, the stars and other life forces in the universe and exists in the world, the peasant's work will be remembered. Okay. So just a couple more things to go with that. Well, should we sort of break it down and go through it bit by bit? So let's have a look at it bit by bit. So I'm just checking how much time I've got, because my recording times out after 15 minutes. Okay, so let's have a look into it. So why might the title be important? A peasant. Now think about what a peasant is. Now a peasant is defined as like a poor smallholder, someone who owns very little, maybe a little land, and is of low status. So immediately it comes across as someone who's just not very important. Should we sort of pay attention to this sort of person? Almost should we ignore them? And there's almost this dismissive tone from the poet, from the off, really, from this very start. Okay, so Iago Pateric, or Paterc, his name, though it be allowed, just an ordinary man at the bald Welsh hills. So what we got come across here, this Welsh hill farmer, immediately we've got this harshness of his rural life, of living in the sort of the countryside, the bald Welsh hills. There's like little there. We might use the word austere, Austere. There's just not very much there at all. That he's not someone that stands out. And we could immediately start to contrast that, couldn't we, with Auntie Jane Fish, who really does stand out. She's a very loud character, very distinctive character, calls our attention to her. Okay, I'm just checking the time. Okay, who pens a few sheep in a gap of cloud. I really like that imagery. It's like he pens a few sheep in the gap of cloud. He lives so high up. We've got this imagery of this mountain poking through the clouds, emphasizes just how isolated he is. And if you're going to live that high up, you must really want to do the job. You must be really committed to it and the nature of the job, that you are going to be isolated. Or you could look at it as another layer of meaning, or another interpretation, say that this is his way of life. It's all he's known. And it's almost like he is almost like living on an island, isn't it? He's separated from people. He doesn't know people. He is cut off from the rest of civilization. And if you've never known people, and you don't know the experience of human contact, then you don't really yearn for it, do you? You don't really want it, because you've never known what it is. Or you could even say that he lacks those sort of social skills, because he's never really had the chance to connect with people. Okay. Moving on from there, Dockin Mangles, chip in the green skin. So docking mango is obviously like the way farms beets, this vegetable. Chip in the green skin. Notice you've got some of these like dock in, chip in, lots of quite dynamic verbs. We've got this like quite emphasizing this, the hard nature, the hard work he does. It's a tough life. It's sort of the hard graft he has to do. Has to be quite physical, even into his old age. He has to be quite physical. There's no sort of time to ease up and just settle into comfortable retirement. Chipping the green skin from the yellow bones, like chipping everything that he needs to get the most out of the carcasses of sheep. He has to chip away everything to use every part of the sheep. Nothing is wasted. With a half-witted grin. And like if someone called me a half-wit, I think I take it quite to heart and be quite upset and offended by it. So we say it's quite a derogatory term. It's almost like the poet is quite critical of him here, as if he's stupid, as if he's a bit oafish, as if he's lacking intelligence, really. Why would you do this job? Why would you isolate yourself so much? You must be stupid. You must be dumb to be so content and happy with such a simple existence. The simplicity of this job. So a half-witted grin of satisfaction, or churning the crude earth, so another dynamic verb there, to a stiff sea of clods that glint in the wind. It's got just how hard, when he's churning the crude earth, he's trying to sort of drag it up, almost as if you're pulling it up so you can plant things. Yeah, when you cut into the earth, so you can put in crops and things where he can plant his beets. Put his potatoes in wherever he needs to sort of grow, and look at it. Look how hard it is. It's so high up. It's so cold as well. You can imagine the stiff sea of clods. Look at that. I mean, the stiff sea of clods. You've got this use of metaphor there, almost like this earth. The clods are like lumps of earth, really, lumps of soil, and that's how. You've got two things. A stiff sea. Well, the sea is huge, isn't it? It's so broad and expansive. So it's the enormity of the task he has to do, in terms of churning up just the wide area of Earth, but also how difficult it is. Yeah, a stiff sea of clods. It's a very difficult task. The glint in the wind, and maybe we've got that idea of the icy frost on the earth that sort of catches the light and just shows it's almost frozen over, obviously making the earth even harder. Okay, we move on then to say, so are his days spent. And this is almost the routine of his life. There's not really much variation in his life except these very physical, very demanding tasks where he's exposed to the elements, very hard physical labor. When we got then his spittled mirth, rarer than the sun that cracks the cheeks of the gaunt sky, perhaps once in a week. Okay, so he gets little relief, really. There's no sun that comes through the clouds, really, or very little of it, just to lighten up his days, like literally lighten up his days. And this idea of spittled mirth, he really smiles. Mirth is like to be happy. He really smiles because, and it's compared with the idea of how little sun comes out, of the gaunt sky. Gaunt is almost like when you think of